And we're live. Welcome to the new episode of Ask Me About My Draculas. If you're unfamiliar with the show, we explain supernatural books, TV shows, and movies. I am one of your hosts, Kel McDonald, and I draw comics that you can find at kelmcdonald.com.
And I am the co-host, Ma'at Crook, and you can find me on Twitter at Ma'at Crook.
And I am J. Rachel Edidin. You can find me at usually hosting Rachel and Miles Explain the X-Men on Twitter at Explain the X-Men, and the web at currently rachelandmiles.com, soon jandmiles.com, because we're in the middle of moving everything.
And Jay is our guest this week, and we're going to discuss Discworld vampires, and in particularly Carpe Jugulum. Ma'at, since you're unfamiliar with Discworld and Carpe Jugulum, what do you think Carpe Jugulum is about?
Well, the Discworld name is obviously about disc golf, obviously. But Carpe Jugulum sounds like Juggalos.
Clearly, it's about the adventures of Juggalos.
Yes.
Playing disc golf.
Yes, clearly.
I would actually read that and probably enjoy it.
All right. So, that's completely wrong, but good job. So the Discworld is by a book series by Terry Pratchett and is all these stories that take place on a disc-shaped world that is on the back of 4 elephants that are on top of a giant turtle.
Swimming through space.
Okay.
And it started as a parody of just fantasy in general and then moved into like satire of society type stuff.
It's an incredibly extensive series and fun to read. There are also now some really good movie and miniseries adaptations.
I was
if you're
going to
better
ask
known
about that. I
books.
thought maybe there was.
Not, I think, this one, though.
Not of Carpe Jugulum. The 3 that have been adapted into miniseries are Hogfather, which is their Christmas book, because it's the Hogfather is their version of Santa, and there are creatures that want to destroy belief in Santa Claus.
But is Hogfather a hog?
Yes.
Okay.
So he's sort of a hog man.
He's porcine.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a hog man, but instead of deer pulling his sleigh, boars do.
And he brings you sausages.
So
Oh my gosh, that's awful.
And then is killed and reborn so that the sun will rise in the new year.
Okay. So you can get more sausages.
yeah,
basically,
exactly.
yeah.
So then, and then the other one that's turned into a miniseries is Going Postal, which is based off my favorite Discworld book, which is about how a con man is hired to convince people that the post office is competent and reliable, and they should keep using it.
And then there's The Color of Magic, which is based on the first of the Discworld novels.
Yes. And then there's 2 little animated like shorts, like they're like an hour long, so they're like animated TV specials, and one is based on soul music, which is a bunch of like musical jokes in a fantasy setting. So one of the main characters' name is Buddy of Holly.
Of course.
So
what kind of jokes though?
so there's a lot of like puns and play on word type things.
If you've ever read Piers Anthony's Xanth books, it's similarly like painfully pointed puns.
Okay.
Although I would argue that Discworld has the advantage of actually being good.
And isn't creepy.
Is not creepy, no.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Or it's occasionally self-consciously creepy, but it's
Yeah.
less. Xanth is sort of, this. It's weird, creepy, kind of dreamy, very traditional, kind of ground out fantasy set in a setting that's based around a lot of puns. Discworld is actually pretty aggressive satire most of the time.
So like Discworld, example of the puns in Discworld is the con man in Going Postal is named Moise von Lipwig, and his last name is Lipwig because false mustache would be a lipwig.
I don't know if that's actually a pun per se, but
A play on words,
Yeah.
sort of like.
yeah.
So it's a lot of like stuff like that. So that makes it that when you reread it, you maybe didn't notice a joke before. Like most of the books take place in Ankh-Morpork, which is
The Twin Cities of Ankh-Morpork.
yes, but they are now Ankh-Morpork.
Isn't that where Hogfather comes from?
Well, that's where most of the stories take place, since Hogfather is a personification of like a holiday. He doesn't.
He is an anthropomorphic personification.
Yes,
specifically.
yes, that's the term they use.
That's also what Death is, who I guess is probably at this point the most famous Discworld character.
Yeah,
Just
Death
kind of
appears in every single book.
And Good Omens. He is the one carryover.
And then the city of Ankh-Morpork is just supposed to be like a kind of.
It's a massive sprawling metropolis, and it's run by and divided largely into guilds. The major forces at work are the guilds, which include guilds for stuff like assassination and theft, which I think are the ones you mainly see.
So it's run by Lord Vetinari, who is the patrician, and he.
What's a patrician?
That's just their ruler title.
And it's not an elected post, is it? Or is it?
It's elected by he murdered the other guy that was the patrician, probably.
Well, and he's a former assassin.
So he used to be an assassin, and there's a joke where he failed his stealth test for not showing up.
You get to see the
it's a lot.
Right. So there's the city guard, which is
the watch,
the city watch, right?
Yeah, and they have the most books about them is the police force, because usually in fantasy books, big problems are handled by heroes or whatever, and the watch doesn't really have a whole lot to do. So the Watch and the Discworld are the main characters to sort of subvert that.
And then there are the wizards. And the wizards start out as the center because the first protagonist is a guy named Rincewind, who is a thoroughly incompetent but very official wizard. He's got a hat that says wizard with 2 Z's on it. And at least at the beginning, he knows only one spell that he can't cast because it'll probably end the world.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So he's a wizard that can't do magic.
And he is my favorite Discworld protagonist because he tries really hard.
And I love the part where he says it's very important that he has a hat. Like, the wizards are very insistent that they always have their hat on, because without their hat, how will people know that they're a wizard? And so,
especially if you're the wizard who can't do it.
Yeah, so Rincewind points to his hat in one book and says, "Do you know what this hat means?" And the first person to respond goes, "That you can't spell?"
That too. No, I like Rincewind because he is a real wizard. Like, that's a thing. I mean, my favorite Rincewind thing, the thing that kind of cemented him as my favorite of the Discworld protagonists, because there are a couple characters who are the foci of a bunch of books. So there's Vimes, who's the center of most of the guards books, is in sorcery when everything is going to hell and he's trying to build a tower in his sleep.
Because wizards always build towers.
At times of
and
crisis.
He's such a wizard that he builds a tower.
And he's a real wizard. He just can't do anything.
And so all the Rincewind books are kind of about exploring different locations in the world. So the first one introduces Ankh-Morpork, and then he is assigned to guide around the tourist, who is a guy named Two Flower, who brings insurance to Ankh-Morpork. He explains what it is to people, and they're like, so it's like gambling.
Or a protection racket.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then it turns into a protection racket in Ankh-Morpork base. And then the tourist also, Rincewind finds infuriating because he's always very friendly and chipper, and nothing bad seems to happen to him because it always ends up falling on Rincewind instead.
Yeah.
Then Rincewind goes to like a hell dimension by accident. That's what Eric is all about when he is summoned by a teenage boy to grant him wishes, because he summoned something up from Rincewind got sucked into hell, and then this kid summoned up something from hell, and Rincewind accidentally got summoned up.
I think your knowledge of the Discworld books and universe is much, much more comprehensive than mine, because my experience with Discworld is almost identical to my experience with Harry Potter, which is that I read all of my housemates' books a few years ago. So those are the ones I've read.
And then the one after that is he goes to the counterweight continent, which is which the tourist is from, which is a mishmash of Japan and China. And
so it's an American's view of...
Well, it's a British person's view.
Yeah.
And he's making fun of like historical events. So then one of the characters that Rincewind always runs into is Cohen the Barbarian, who is Conan the Barbarian, but since Conan never gets defeated or killed, Cohen is the logical what would happen to him. So Cohen is 90, he thinks. He lost track. But he's still like super barbarian who wins all the fights and rescues damsels, and he runs the Silver Horde, which is a bunch of other like 90-year-old barbarian guys.
So has Terry Pratchett talked about where he got these ideas from?
He's casting a hugely wide net.
Yeah.
A lot of what he's going after is specific social satire, and that becomes more and more and more prevalent as the series progresses.
Yeah, so like
or going after specific institutions, like Going Postal is basically all about
the post office versus the internet. Only it's the post office versus class.
telegrams, which wasn't actually.
Well, the way it's written, it's basically about post office versus email, because he meets clackers who are hackers, and they're the lone GNU. No, the smoking GNU, and they act like the lone gunman and the X-Files, and
there's moving pictures, which is all about it, which is basically early Hollywood.
Yeah. So like the one where Rincewind goes to, basically their China is kind of about the communist revolution, because it's the middle class versus the old traditionalist regime. And Rincewind points out that, like, has anyone actually talked to the farmers about what they want? And there is a part where Rincewind actually goes up to one of the farmers who mostly stands around and is letting his cow poop in the field. And he's like, why do you do that all day? He's like, it's better for the soil. And he goes, fair enough. And he goes, what do you want in life? And the guy thinks about it and goes, I suppose a longer string would be nice.
Longer strings?
Because he has the cow by a string.
Oh.
So he could get to be further away from the cow while it's taking it down.
Fair enough.
So he goes, yeah, did you know that those two people are fighting for you in theory? And he goes, well, that's nice of them.
And then the other end of that, so you get Night's Watch, which is basically about fascism and surveillance state.
Yeah. And so then all the guard books, like, he takes certain things that usually are found in police sort of movies and stuff. Like, one of them,
Like time travel.
yes. The second one is kind of about affirmative action in the Watch for the first time, but since it's a fantasy series, he has to hire the first dwarf and the first troll to the Watch and the first werewolf to the Watch. So, and then
does the werewolf have, like when they're a werewolf at night on
they
the
wear
watch?
their badges on a collar, even when they're in a human form, so they can just go back and forth.
Oh, so they still can think
Yeah,
like the same.
it's
in
the way
uniform.
they just explained it is the way their werewolves work is their brain thinks like whatever form they're in, like it slowly shifts over to that. So they don't like to stay a wolf for a very long time because that makes it harder to think. But then staying a human makes it harder to make quick decisions and be a little bit more cutthroat.
Mm.
So the werewolf character that's in all the Watch books is Angua, who's a lady, and is talking about how it's inconvenient to be a lady werewolf because at least a dude werewolf just has to find trousers.
She has a boyfriend named Carrot, who is a very, very tall adopted dwarf.
Oh my gosh. Named Carrot?
Yes.
Are they a redhead?
Yes.
Yes. He may or may not be a lost king of something.
He is definitely a lost king, and he is aware that he's a lost king. He has just chosen not to become king. So the first Watch book is all about, like, there's a destined lost king who's going to return to the city in time of need, and he ends up joining the Watch. And then because the head of the Watch hates kings, and he really respects the Watch head, he decides to not
Pursue his destined kingship.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he's still coming to terms with the discovery that he's adopted in that one.
He comes to it pretty quick. Like, and the second book is when he finds out that he's a lost king, and he has a conversation with the patrician that's about how the throne is very shoddy craftsmanship, and it's probably safer for everyone if no one sits on it. And Then there's a few books about Moist Fun Lipwig, the con man, and that's about like the collective lies sort of everyone believes. So he has the post office one, and that's more about like marketing and people having a monopoly, because the reason why the post office needs to be elevated is the Clacks, the guy who runs it, has a monopoly on communication now.
I'm assuming clacks means
Clacks
like
are, telegraph, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a telegraph, but it's like a tower that flaps lights instead of beeps.
Oh,
So
okay.
Similar system though.
yeah,
And there's, is Movable Type a moist book? Or moving type?
The Truth is a standalone
The Truth,
book.
yes.
So they have a few standalone books, and one is The Truth, and that's about newspapers coming to Ankh-Morpork and what is important and what is the truth. And then after that book, what's fun about the books is you can read them in any order, but if you do read them in order, you get stuff like after the truth happens, the reporters are in almost every book as like a cameo. Because now there's newspapers, so why wouldn't they be there when important stuff is going on? And but the one that we're going to focus on today focuses on the witches.
So how far in are you? How many books are we up to?
Well,
now?
they're all scattered about, so
Okay.
Or multiple parallel sort of arcs
Yeah.
and miniseries.
so he jumps around, and they're so like the witches. Rincewind has book 1 and 2, but then book 3 is the first witch book, and then book 4 is all about the personification of death. Because all of the death books are about death kind of trying to understand humans, and that's more about like metaphysics and the power of belief, which is the Hogfather one has death as the main character.
Or is one of them sort of going between Death and his granddaughter?
Yeah. So
Who has the best hair in Discworld?
and so so the witches, like whereas Ankh-Morpork is the big sprawling city, the witches live in Lancre, which is all their like small town politics. So the main witches, there's always 3. There has to be the Mother Maiden and the Crone, and they're very insistent on that. And the Crone would be Granny Weatherwax, who is just a badass lady in Discworld. And then the mother would be Nanny Og, who is a lady that has had 15 children and has 1 million grandchildren and is related to most of Lancre because of that. There's a part where they're surrounded by an angry mob and she starts to wave hi to people because it's like, oh, there's our Jason and there's our son. And then the first maiden is Magrat, who's kind of based off of like hippy dippy types.
The name.
Her name
sounds
is
like,
Magrat because her mother didn't know how to spell Margaret and wrote Margaret wrong on her birth certificate.
There is a Magrat Bat Malat, which is the angel of prostitution, too, in Hebrew angel myth.
Cool. I'm sure she would not fit that very well.
Okay.
So she's like kind of a hippy dippy Mother Earthy type person and sort of a reference on those, but she eventually gets married to the king.
I was wrong. It's Agrat Bat Malat. Sorry. Go on.
So Magrat eventually gets married to the king and is still around, but she can't be the maiden because, as Nanny Og says, well, they've been married for 3 months, so they must have by now. And
there's a king of Longcrow?
yes, Lancre has a king, even though there's like 30 people in Lancre.
Very limited monarchy.
Yeah. And so they get a new maiden character right before Carpe Jugulum, and that's Masquerade, which is a parody of Phantom of the Opera. And that is Agnes Knit, who's kind of a parody of like goth girls. She's an overweight girl that wants to wear a lot of dark makeup and has black lacy fingerless gloves. And what I thought was, since I recently have been revisiting them, I noticed that like, well, Magrat is their maiden. It's all more fairy tale traditional stories.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they get Agnes, they start to focus on kind of more gothy stories. So you get the Phantom of the Opera, and now we have Carpe Jugulum.
It was Draculas.
Yes. sees the throat.
So this is mostly going to be on you because I actually haven't read any of the witches' books.
Well, you need to
I will.
because Granny Weatherwax is
It'll happen.
great. So this is the last of the main first witches books. The witches books there's ones that are all about like Granny and Nanny, and then the second half of the witch books are all about Tiffany Aping, who's a brand new witch, and those are also like
Those are the shorter kind of YA ones, right?
yeah, those are all YA ones. So this is the last of the ones that aren't YA. And
What makes them witches? Like, what do they
so
do?
the first witch book is called Equal Rights and compares the magic between the magic that women cast versus the magic that wizards cast.
Yeah,
So-
wizards are all male.
Oh,
Yeah, so the wizards are all male, and they are very like into academia type stuff. They're making fun of academia and like higher science stuff. So it's a lot of things that the average person thinks are useless. And then the magic that the witches cast is a lot of like folk remedy stuff and midwifery. So Nanny Ogg's claim to fame is that she is the best midwife in the history of the disc.
Mm.
So she knows the most about female anatomy because she puts it to good use. There's a lot of dirty jokes with Nanny Ogg. She's a little plump old lady with a million kids who her favorite song is the Hedgehog song, which is a song about bestiality.
Oh my. Okay then.
So the chorus is the hedgehog can't be buggered at all.
That seems reasonable.
So Nanny
Mating hedgehogs are ridiculous. Just for the record.
So Nanny Ogg's whole deal is she's very good with people. She likes to drink. She likes to have a good time. She is kind of the social center of all of Longcrow. Like she always knows what's going on because she's a big gossip as well. So,
And she's got Draculas.
and then Granny Weatherwax ends up. She knows what's going on, but she's more of a loner, like Wicked Witch type. She's kind of a commentary on Wicked Witch and fairy tales and stuff. She lives alone in the woods, and she knows what's going on because she can see through the eyes of animals, and she's really good at that. So it's kind of like she knows what's going on in general with the wilderness, and then Nanny knows what's going on with the people.
How does that work with werewolves? Do they ever actually explore that?
They don't ever. She can't jump into a person's mind because it's explained as people minds are too much of a fog, whereas animal minds are a dot. So it's easier to aim for a dot than a fog.
Mm.
And in Carpe Jugulum, Magrat has just had a baby. So
And Magrat's the middle one.
She
Magrat,
is the former maiden.
she was the
Oh,
former
yeah.
maiden who married the king. So it's Queen Magrat has just had a daughter, and now Granny. Now that has upset the witches because now they have two mothers.
Oh.
They have a fourth witch, and that's no good.
Okay.
The other reason why it caused problems is because her husband, in a chance to be diplomatic, has sent out invitations to all the nobility that are nearby, and one of those noble families happens to be the Magpare family, which are Draculas.
Okay.
And so Draculas have been invited into the castle.
The horror.
Important question.
Yes.
Was Carrot invited?
Carrot was not invited because he is not officially royalty.
I feel like he'd be really good with kids, though.
He would. He starts a soccer game in the middle of a war in
See?
Jingo.
There you go.
Jingo is about them going to war with their neighbor that's vaguely Middle Eastern, and instead of a battle, Carrot talks everyone into having a soccer game.
Carrot is really good at de-escalation.
Yes, that's what he's all about.
Yes.
Which would be great for a king.
Yeah,
Well, and is also good for someone who's in a relatively high rank in the city.
police force. Yeah. So,
The city watch is the police force.
Okay.
Okay.
Basically, yeah.
So yes, so vampires have been invited into the castle for the christening of Magrat's daughter, who's going to be christened by an Omnian priest. This causes problems because the Omnian religion used to burn witches. And so someone did not do their homework when trying to find a priest.
And is Magrat upset about this? Or?
She was like, well, they don't do it anymore, but Nanny is very upset about this and keeps being uncharacteristically unfriendly, which makes Nanny worry that she's turning into the crone of the group.
Oh, no.
So the daughter is then christened Esmeralda Note Spelling because she wanted to make sure her daughter's name was spelled right.
So her middle name is
Note Spelling.
I can sort of identify with that.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Yeah.
And Granny Weatherwax is upset because she has not been invited to the christening, but it turns out that a raven stole it. So she wasn't actually not invited.
Did the raven come?
The raven used the gold foil for its nest.
Oh.
So
That seems uncomfortable.
it wanted to make its nest all pretty.
Fair.
So vampires show up and start to use their vampire hypnotism. The vampires
Just sort of for the hell of it?
because they're going to take over the castle. But Agnes Knit, who is the maiden of the group, has a split personality. It's basically her split personality is, since she is a witch, she has what she wishes she was, who is Perdita X, and X stands for someone who has a really cool middle name. Agnes gets really mad because the small town folks in Lancre, instead of calling her Perdita like she wants to, are calling her Agnes, who now wants to be called Perdita. So Perdita has now because she has magic, Perdita has now manifested as like a second personality.
Mm.
And that makes it unable for the vampires to mind control her because she just switches personalities whenever they have control of one personality.
That's convenient.
So Vlad, the son of the head Dracula, is like, so you're interesting because you don't fall for mind controlling powers. And they have a little gothic teen romance.
Oh, I was about to say.
He has a sister who is rebelling against vampire Dracula traditions by wearing a lot of pink and frilly clothes.
You know, I can sort of see that, but on the other hand, I keep on going back to this odd NPR spot I heard years and years ago that argued that pink was the truest goth color because you could pull it off and still look really gothy. It meant you really had your shit down.
And the Addams Family house, wasn't it, in real life, painted?
Like, yeah, it was like
I have
pink.
no idea.
Yeah.
It's because the black and white
Right.
film picked up colors weird, so.
But it looks awesome in color.
I bet.
It totally, if they had done color TV, I think we probably would have seen more goth people in pink.
Yeah.
So the other person who can resist vampire mind control is the Omnian priest because he is very torn between what he's supposed to do and what's practical. So it's these two people that have dual selves that are the ones that can avoid vampire mind control.
I like the idea of inner conflict as a superpower. I feel like
Yeah.
that would put a lot of us in much better stead than we are as a default.
So meanwhile, Granny Weatherwax has gone off into the wilderness to go live in a cave because they have their mother maiden in the crown and they don't need her anymore, is our thought.
Aww.
But at least that's what everyone assumes is why she's going off to the wilderness. She's also like, oh no, I knew the vampires were coming and I didn't want to fall for vampire nonsense.
Mm.
All the vampires in Discworld are very traditional Draculas. So
Do they have Dracula medallions?
They do. They all have
Excellent.
Dracula.
That's important.
So they all have Dracula medallions, and they all are like, so crosses and garlic and everything are what hurts them.
Okay.
When they use their mind control powers, does a ray of light shine just on their eyes?
We don't know because it's in prose, so we don't get that.
Are they double jointed in Hungarian?
No, I don't think so. So we find out, though, that these vampires are different because they don't fall for all those things. because the head of this vampire family wants to be more modern, and that's silly to be hurt by crosses and garlic. So he
can just decide not to be?
Yes.
That's convenient.
He's like, they're just symbols and they don't mean anything, and he has also trained his children to be more modern. This is much to the disappointment of his Igor, which is a job position. And Igor is more traditionalist and keeps sneaking spiders into the corners.
Oh my god.
And he talks with a lisp unless he forgets to. And
I remember Igors, they're unionized, right?
Yes. Yes. The Igors are unionized.
Yeah.
It's kind of awesome.
And all Igors have to talk with a lisp unless they forget to.
Yeah.
The Igors are the best surgeons in the Discworld
They'd have to be.
because they're putting themselves back together and finding new body parts that are better than the ones that they have at the moment.
They're Frankensteins?
Somewhat.
Somewhat, because they're never dead. They just
They're just, souped up a bit.
yeah. So
They're modular.
yeah. So it's like, well, this person has better arms than me, so when someone who's an Igor says he has his father's eyes, they're
He
literal.
means it. So are the Igors actually a species, or is it just a job? Like, can anyone decide to become one?
That's a little bit unclear. I forget. They haven't really gone into that. I know that there's a lady Igor. So I think it's a species. But they take regular human parts, because that's the deal. If an Igor gives you a new foot, then when you die, you have to donate your organs to the Igor collective.
That seems fair.
Is everyone who is an Igor as a job named Igor?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless they're a girl, then they're Igorinus.
I would just go with the Igor.
I don't know. It's euphonious. Igorina?
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 It's too much.
You just say it over and over. So, are the vampires otherwise traditional too? Like they, drink blood.
Yeah,
can't
they
go out in
drink
the
blood.
day?
Yeah. So they drink blood. These ones can go out in the day because they have decided
Because they're modern.
Because they're modern vampires. It's very important that they're modern vampires.
I don't know why I'm picturing them in leisure suits, but I am, and I'm having trouble shaking that.
Well, yeah. When was this book written?
This book, I think it was late 90s.
Okay, so pre-Sparkle.
Pre-Sparkle, yes. Definitely pre-Sparkle.
So what are the, usually you can trace, what Terry Pratchett's riffing on to pretty specific like groups, and obviously there's the Dracula influence. What are vampire tropes is he digging into here?
Well, I think that he's obviously digging into the goth tropes because
the romance.
Then you have, well, also like goth kids, you have like the antithesis of gothiness is the vampire daughter because she wants to rebel by not being goth. So her and her friends hang out all day at noon and then wear like pastel colors and insist on being called things like Joan and
and are thoroughly wholesome.
Yes, but she still eats people, so it's more she's kind of preppy rather than gothy. That's how she's rebelling. How
does feeding work for Discworld vampires? Like,
so they do bite Granny Weatherwax while fighting her because they want to turn Granny Weatherwax into a vampire because she's the bestest witch, so she would be a great vampire.
So she could still have her powers while being a.
So the thing is being a witch, it seems like, is a lot about self-confidence. So there's a lot of stuff where a lot of the young witches get mad because whenever they see Granny Weatherwax do magic, she's not actually doing real magic. It's stuff like a guy has a bad back and she tells him that he has to sleep on a slab of pine so that way the wood absorbs the knots in his back. And then while he's on his way out, she pretends to trip and then like knees him in the back so it cracks and he's basically got chiropractic, but he now thinks it's the wood. And it's basically the explanation is that's what the people can understand. They know who they're talking to enough on how much they can understand. So they're finding the quickest solution to get things done.
Okay. So the vampires want Granny Weatherwax.
Yes. So they bite her, but then they start craving tea and cookies because she's so powerful that her blood has weatherwaxed them rather than vampired her.
Excellent.
I love that weatherwaxed is like not just a name now. It's a
good verb.
yeah.
So
I couldn't think of the word verb.
So they have to retreat home to their vampire castle, and they're very annoyed that their Igor has put spiders everywhere, and has been because he's being too old timey. And then when they follow the vampires to where they live, which is in Uverwald, which is basically Transylvania from old Hammer movies, they see that the vampires have turned giving blood to the vampires into bureaucracy, and that's terrifying.
I like that bureaucracy is this. It's like what's scary, not that person.
So then it turns out that if a vampire dies in Discworld, they turn to dust, but they can be brought back to life anytime with a drop of blood. So what they do is they bring back the father of the modern vampire, who is more of a traditionalist. And it seems the villagers prefer very stereotypical Dracula to this modern Dracula, because he would go in, like, cause some trouble, and then some kid would get to, like, sneak into the castle and find mysteriously supplies of garlic and crosses, because that's sportsmanly of this classic Dracula. He wants it to be fair. And then if the kid succeeds in killing him, then that gives some civic pride to everyone in the village.
And he can always be reconstituted.
And he can always be reconstituted later.
I like how much of Discworld law is basically genre convention.
Yeah. So it's like, and so it's him and the book like ends with the vampire that's been the villain the whole time, the modern one, and his dad getting into an argument on the way you're supposed to be a Dracula.
Yeah,
So,
I was gonna picture I was picturing that was totally gonna have to happen.
Yeah.
Like, how old is this modern dad?
years and thousands of years.
Thousands of years, and then his dad comes in as well. You're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
You're not respecting
Dracula
our
enough.
culture.
And so there are other vampire characters throughout Discworld, like in The Truth, there's the photographer is Otto Schreck, and he is a black ribbiner, which is all the vampires that have forsaken blood. They say they won't drink it. And it turns out blood is just an addiction, so they just have to replace that addiction with a different addiction. So in one of the other books, Monsters Regiment, there's a vampire soldier who's addicted to caffeine and cigarettes.
Okay.
Which so often happens to people that go into Narcotics Anonymous.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
They just switch it.
over. Yeah.
So Otto Schreck, who's the photographer for the newspaper, is addicted to art and the play of light and dark, so that's why he's a photographer. But the flash of the camera keeps burning him into crisp, so he has to be reconstituted every time he takes a picture for the newspaper.
Oh my
He's very dedicated.
He's very dedicated to his craft.
Oh man, that makes me want to just go watch Shadow of the Vampire again.
And
With
John Malkovich.
yes.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Have you guys done that one yet?
no, we haven't
Not done
talked
that
about
one.
it. Yeah. There's a bunch that are good ones, and I'm all, why haven't we talked about this yet?
There are so many Draculas.
There's a lot of
Yes.
Draculas. Sometimes it's hard to find someone who hasn't seen a particular Dracula.
Yeah, there are some that we've wanted to talk about.
But everyone has seen them,
Yeah,
so we can't
we're gonna
explain
skip
them.
Like what?
The
The
Drac-
Blade one was really hard.
It was
until
really
we
hard to find someone that
Johnson.
hasn't heard of Blade.
Yeah.
The closest we got.
Especially since you're mostly plumbing comic circles.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we did end up finding somebody.
Yeah.
The Dracula
The
movies.
basically
ones titled
any
Dracula.
movie titled Dracula. Like, what do you think the movie titled Dracula is about? Yeah. So we're gonna save that for like a big episode to
You
just
do
talk
all
about
the Draculas.
all the Dracula.
Yes.
But yeah. So we've gone for about an hour. So any questions about Discworld Draculas?
So, yeah, go ahead.
Got one. So I know in Discworld you keep on seeing characters reappearing and showing up and echoing through. Do you ever see what happens to that family long term?
You don't see what happens to the Draculas long term now.
What about the witches?
The witches, well, so like I said, they're main characters, so they keep coming back. So when it switches over to YA, you get less of them, but you get Granny Weatherwax is in every single, like, Tiffany Aching book, which is the YA witch books. And because she's sort of the mentor for the new main character. And you find out that Agnes, after all this vampire stuff, has decided that maybe she quit the opera too soon. Because Agnes's other superpower is that she has a very powerful voice and she can harmonize with herself. That's how good she is. So Masquerade was her trying out for the opera and what modern ideas of opera versus classical ideas of opera.
Ooh, that's very much my jam, and I should go read it.
Yeah, so it was basically because she's a very overweight girl, so they're like, well, she's perfect to sing the soprano lead. And then the guy who just bought the company's like, well, this skinny blonde girl is really pretty, but can't sing. And her dad donated a lot of money to the opera house. So how about we have Agnes sing her part secretly and throw her voice so it looks like...
And singing in the rain.
Yeah.
Damn it.
So,
It's doing opera wrong.
So after that, she quits opera, goes back to Long Crow, but after this, in one of the Tiffany Aching books, it is mentioned that she has pursued her career as an opera singer, so she obviously, in between books, went back to sing operas.
Excellent.
And then Nayog is always around, having a drink, telling a dirty joke.
Having a bunch of kids.
She's done having kids. She's too old to have kids.
Oh no, she just has them.
She's
not
them.
producing them. She's just sort of maintaining them at this point.
Yeah. The only people that Nanny Og is mean to is her daughters-in-law, because she has to be the stereotypical mother-in-law. But Nanny Og does not do housework and hasn't since her oldest daughter was old enough to hold the feather duster. So Nanny Og is a lot of fun she's where all the dirty jokes come from. And it's fun because she's a little old lady, so everyone's always surprised that she's all like, so here's a dirty song about hedgehog. And she is she has a love affair with a dwarf Casanova.
Oh my.
Because the explanation is, like, since dwarves live longer, when she says her age, like, he's like, that's like a teenager for dwarves. And he gets her lots of, like, chocolates and things, and she's used to dudes, just country boys being like, so we're bored, let's go in the field. So she was very impressed by a guy trying to woo her with chocolates, and she didn't need that much wooing because she thinks it's fun. And then she wrote a book called The Joy of Snacks, which is the joy of sex. So.
Well, I tried to read the first Discworld book, and I didn't even make it through. But now, after listening to you, maybe I'll try again.
It's a rough start. I would actually recommend starting with one of the later books.
Yeah, so I told you earlier to try Monstrous Regiment, which is about girls dressing up as boys to join the army.
Honestly, and this is probably going to be the only time you ever hear, well, one of maybe 2 times you ever hear me say this, I would read some of the later books and then watch the Color of Magic movie.
Okay.
Because the book is rough. The book is, if you've read the later stuff, it's very much Pratchett's still kind of getting his footing as a novelist, as well as within Discworld. And
I would say that for the first
movie
3
goes
books.
back to it with his later sensibilities and with the much more developed world. And it's also really, really, really well cast and produced. I can't remember the name of the actor who plays Rincewind. He's the same. He's in Hogfather too as Death's assistant, and he's much older than Rincewind is usually described as, or usually sort of
Yeah, Rincewind's supposed to be like 30 something, but they cast him as an old man in the movie because it's a guy who has wanted to play Rincewind since he was age appropriate to be Rincewind.
Well, and here's the thing, for me at least, An older Rincewind works much, much, much better. It makes the character a lot more interesting and gives him a lot more sort of innate pathos. So
I don't know why, but the name made me picture someone who was older.
That's because he's a wizard.
right,
That too, maybe.
gotta have the long gray beard.
But I'm perfectly okay with a younger guy being a wizard too, because I really enjoyed the why am I not thinking words? The book you introduced me to with
Dresden.
Files. Thank
Files.
you.
The other wizard named Harry.
Yeah, but he's a secret wizard.
Harry goes in secret wizard.
That's right. That's what it says.
He does not have a hat that says wizard.
No.
He should.
I could totally picture him on Halloween dressing.
He might as well. He's not a secret wizard, but for some reason the Netflix description of the Dresden Files series describes him as a secret wizard.
Oh.
Which somehow just sort of stuck in the way we talked about them, despite the fact that he advertises himself in the phone book as a wizard in that as well as in the books. So
Yeah.
I have no idea
So I
why.
have the art of Discworld. That is Rincewind.
Okay. Yeah, he looks 30 there.
That's Cohen the Barbarian.
Cohen.
This is the Captain of the Watch.
Oh, look. She
And
has the light ray on her
This
eyes.
is Tiffany Aking, so she's the YA witch.
Okay.
And I'll try to find pictures of. This is Lord Vetinari.
So everybody's listening to this and they aren't
They
seeing
can't
it.
see
Can't see it. It's true.
You can just Google the art of Discworld.
We could just hold. We could. You're screencasting, right? You could just hold up the book. Or switch to
like to be on
switch to video. Well, that's why you'd be holding up the book.
We're in infinity.
We are.
Have we been doing infinity this whole time?
No, I
Wow.
moved it off so it was looking at me, not drawing.
Okay.
So here is the Discworld watch. I can't pull it far enough behind.
And now you know.
Now you know what we're looking at. It's the art of Discworld.
Oh, it's backwards.
Oh, yeah, it does that.
This week, ever.
I think this is, since we're now just looking at pictures that everyone else can't see, it might be a good time
It's
to
probably
end it.
about time.
So thanks everyone for watching.
Bye.